Hi, everyone, and welcome to Huddle in Place of the Nine-Sided Circle. We are on episode, 54. Yes, it's the 54th episode, and it is May 24th, 2020. I'm one of your hosts. I'm Noor Kyle in Los Angeles currently.
And I'm the other one of your hosts, Mushtaq Ali, up in the Bay Area.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What's going on behind you?
Ghosts.
Yeah, seriously. I'm like, is there someone creeping in the bushes behind you?
Yeah, ghosts creeping in the bushes. This is a haunted lotus pond.
Ooh, it's spooky.
Ghosts of enlightenment past all congregate at this pond. They contemplate the lotuses and wish that they were in nirvana.
Good story. Good story.
Yeah.
So, any updates? What's going on?
The world is getting sillier by the moment.
Yes, we seem to say that a lot, but it is true. Everything is confusing and chaotic.
Yeah, and people have forgotten how to think, if they ever knew.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Everything is politics.
That's the hard part right now. I mean, that's what comes to my mind as well.
Turned into politics.
So it's not that we just have a pandemic and some people are suffering and some people are doing okay. It's like the lines drawn are so rigid between who's wearing a mask, who's not wearing a mask, who believes that coronavirus, COVID-19 is a serious illness, who doesn't, all that stuff.
Yeah, it's bizarre. I watched a video today of the governor of North Dakota, not the person who is trying to infect the native peoples in South Dakota with the virus, but the governor of North Dakota, who is a Republican, who was in tears, literally in tears, begging the people of North Dakota to drop the politics and not try and divide his state by mask wearers versus no mask wearers.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that he was willing to take that stand because his constituents need to hear from him.
Yes, and you know, a virus has no politics.
Exactly, yeah.
We learned this years and years and years ago when Poe wrote the story, The Mask of the Red Death.
Do you want to say a little more?
Yeah. Edgar Allan Poe, brilliant writer in his own way, did some beautiful stuff. And he wrote a story, short story, called The Mask of the Red Death. And in it, all the rich people locked themselves in this big castle and partied while everybody else around them died. And they had a mask, which is like a masquerade ball. And somebody came as the Red Death. And everybody thought it was in really bad taste. But, as it turns out, it was the Red Death. And all the money that they had and all the power that they had and all of the authority and all of this did not keep him from harvesting all of them. And they all died horribly, terribly.
Yep.
In great pain and misery.
Yeah.
So, a virus knows no politics. Virus does not care if you are a Democrat or a Republican. Virus does not care if you're male or female, if you're black, white, red, yellow, or any other color of the rainbow.
Yep.
The virus does not care if you are gay or straight or any of the other myriad ways that somebody can be. All the virus wants to do is get inside of your body and infect you and make you incredibly sick and ideally not die, but come as close to it as possible while it runs rampant reproducing itself, and then have you pass it on.
And, there's something to be said about patterns that are showing up around who is being infected and stuff, but it has nothing to do with politics and all that stuff, and so much more to do with the way things are organized in our society. Who has access to what? Those kinds of things.
Yep. And who believes what?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. We had what was it, Missouri? In Missouri, where everybody's stubborn like a mule. They had all of the hairdressers open. And there's this one hairdresser, and she's actively sick with the virus. She has symptoms, and she goes to work, and she comes into contact with like 90 people in 8 days.
Mm-hmm. Super spreader.
Yep.
Yeah.
Same thing has happened at a couple of the churches that have opened up. We have clusters of the disease popping up a couple of weeks after the first service.
Yeah, I mean, this is a difficult time because obviously people who benefit a lot from going to church and stuff, that's where they want to be, but they forget that, again, like you said, the virus doesn't think along the lines of who's a church going individual and who isn't. It doesn't matter.
And if you think that God is going to protect you from the virus, I just have this one thought for you, which is that the God must also answer the virus's prayers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just think about that for a moment. God must like viruses because he made so many of them. There's more viruses, I think, than insects.
Well, God is in the virus, and the virus is in God, and all that stuff.
All that stuff.
Yeah. We forget those things.
Yep.
All too easily.
Yeah, so the virus is sitting there going, "Oh God, you who created me in your image, please send me a good, healthy host that I might infect and multiply and be fruitful."
Yeah. That is the value of the virus. That is what the virus values. Yeah. So, yes, the topic we wanted to slip into today is the concept of value and values. What has value to each of us?
What are your values? Now, there are two ways to look at this. This word can be used in at least two different manners. One is a set of rules laid upon you from the outside.
As so often is the case.
Yeah, and they say, these are your values, like family values. Family values are not values. They are a set of rules that somebody made up, and they want you to believe them.
Yeah, and we have this image of them being like universal values, but they are not.
No.
No. So things like, when we say family values, for instance, what does that mean? That's going to be different in different contexts, ideally, but
for most of the world, for the last 4,000 years, family values means that you get to sell your daughters to the highest bidder to create ties between you and other families.
It can mean you are with each other until death, even if it's a terribly abusive relationship.
Or it could mean you can have several spouses at the same time. That's a family value. The Bible supports that. Only if you're a dude.
Right.
Yeah.
So
there are also cases of polyandry, so.
However rare, yes, that is a thing, especially in Nepal and such.
Yep.
But, I mean, we have what we would think of as externally imposed values, and those would be things like so-called family values.
Religious values.
Yeah, political values.
And you can tell when you run across them because mostly if you say the words, they don't make any sense.
Hmm.
Family values. Nobody can even define what that is.
It's just this amorphous blob that is
Yeah.
like outside of you.
But you can all agree on it. Yeah, family values. What a good idea.
Yeah, that's kind of not what we're talking about here.
No, what we are talking about here is internally generated values.
Yeah.
Values that you can actually state, that you can state in ways that everybody can understand.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So
these are going to be developed from the inside out. This is going to be stuff that comes from your own consideration and discernment, usually based on your own experiences, your own witnessing of yourself and others around you in the world in general.
Yeah, and they're going to be different from everybody, from one person to another. And sometimes they will look like some of these things that are externally.
They may match up, but the difference is whether they've been something that you've internalized or if you've, kind of shaped it within yourself.
Yeah, I know people who live their lives pretty much according to the idea of, quote, family values. But they do it from the inside out. They do it because that's the way that they feel like is the proper way for them to live, regardless of what anybody tells them.
Yeah.
And that's a whole different thing.
Right. So how do you think we generate these values, and why might that be so significant at a time like now?
We generate these values by listening to the deeper parts of ourselves. We ask ourselves, what is true? Yeah. For values, I can ask myself, what am I not willing to give up? And I can come up with something like, I'm not willing to give up my swords. And then I ask myself, is there any circumstances under which I would give up my swords? And I think about that and I go, yeah, if Kyle were sick, if Noor were sick, I would sell my swords and hire her a doctor. I wouldn't even think twice about it.
So sweet. Thank you.
So that's an example of how you can drill down to what's true for you about your values.
Yeah.
And so for me, my connection with people is my primary value.
Wow. Yeah.
And that becomes very clear if I ask myself a few questions. Objects, I mean, I like my swords. My swords are fun, but I'm not particularly attached to them. I am attached to certain people.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I certainly feel the same way. So really leaning into the relationships that are closest to my heart is really important. That's like top. And then after that, it's like compassion for all beings and safe, brave communication. Things like that are things that I value a lot, and I would sacrifice a lot for those things.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the question is, do you know what your values really are? And if you do, can you state them in a way that another person could understand it and do it the way you do it? Because that's how you know you've really defined your values.
That's interesting. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about that. Like this part about stating it in such a way that other people could do those things.
Okay, let me think of something.
Yeah.
If I say, I value truth, that doesn't really mean much.
Yeah, that's kind of vague.
It's that vague nominalization that politicians use to befuddle you.
Yep.
If I say, I value always telling you exactly what I'm thinking and how I'm feeling as it is relevant to you.
Yeah.
That's something you can understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I say I value freedom, most people when they say freedom, they mean slavery, for God's sake. You know, so this was one of my first values that I actually came to as a young hippie, running around trying to have anti-war and stuff. And you know, I realized that for me, freedom meant being able to have agency over my own life and not have anyone or anything impose restrictions upon me that I felt were unreasonable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
I think
yeah,
that's a value that you and I share.
yeah. So I have no problem with stop signs. Stop signs seem like a really brilliant idea to me. Stoplights too. But I had a real problem with the draft. You know,
Yeah.
this idea that my country could enslave me and send me off to fight these people who I didn't know and had nothing against, not because they were trying to hurt us, but because some corporate interest wanted control of their country.
Mhm.
And so that tweaked my value of freedom.
And that's specific. That's not just like freedom, this nebulous
Yeah.
buzzword
It's
type
like
idea.
slavery is bad. How many kinds of slavery do we have in this country? Did you know that slavery is still legal in the United States of America?
Yeah.
According to our Constitution.
Prison labor.
Prison labor. You can enslave somebody for a crime. It says so right there in the Constitution. And that will help explain to you why our prisons are so full.
And who they're full with.
Yes.
Yep. So I think, this is obviously a deep topic,
Yeah.
but I think one thing we wanted to point out is that during times of crisis, crises of conscience and of, existential crises, those kinds of things can really get you potentially in a mindset where your values are clarified for you. And why do you think that might be, Mushtaq?
Because
Like,
we are now kind of forced to look at things.
yeah.
One would
Yeah.
hope we're forced to look at things, like the whole face mask thing.
Mm-hmm.
Face masking has become political. It's like, I should have the freedom to not wear a face mask.
Yeah.
Fine. Should you have the freedom to infect me with your disease? And I say, no, you don't have that freedom.
Right.
History supports me on this, including the history of this country.
Mm-hmm.
During the 1918 flu pandemic, men with guns went around enforcing the face mask thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, they called people who didn't wear masks mask slackers.
Yes, I love that. Yes.
I do too.
We have
And
plenty of
they
those
would
now
throw
too.
them in jail.
Yeah.
During outbreaks of smallpox, people would go around and board up your house and tell you, don't come out until you're healthy again. We'll drop some food off at your door. And they'd put signs up, no admittance, no exit. And there were people who would enforce that.
Yeah, that would be tough to enforce now. There's some nuances that are, there's this real sense that I feel like today that would be considered threatening, and yet things like that do not only necessarily protect others, but they keep you in a position of holding up your end of the social contract in certain ways.
Yeah, and whether it's good or not, it's established practice.
Yeah.
We have seen this with all of the major plagues that have hit the country. We've seen it with smallpox. We've seen it with chickenpox and measles. We've seen it with tuberculosis, where people with highly infective tuberculosis would literally be confined to sanitariums against their will if necessary.
Yeah.
I know this because my father was in a tuberculosis sanitarium. Right. I know how this works. And if he wanted to just get up and leave, they would not have let him until he was no longer at risk of infecting other people.
Wow. I mean, it's interesting because that is so, I mean, like, even for me sitting here, I'm listening to that and thinking, wow, that would not fly. Like, there's something about the cultural milieu that has shifted somewhat. And, whether we value that as positive or negative, it's obviously causing some harm.
Yep. And
So,
it might fly, it might not. It
yeah.
depends on how it's handled.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And a few militia people might need to be shot in the face by the cops.
Yeah.
Which is what would have happened back then.
Right.
Not that I think that that's a good idea. I think that that's a bad idea.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So in terms of values, I mean, this may be a time for people to drill down so that when we are making our way through this experience, we can figure out what steps to take going forward by leaning on those values that we've discerned through this process. But yeah, so do you have anything else you want to add?
Check your values.
Yeah.
And consider what they are. Ask yourself, what are your values really? What are you not willing to give up under any circumstances?
Mm-hmm.
What are you willing to give up under certain circumstances, but not others? And
Yeah.
what don't matter to you at all?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So yeah, that's what we have for you today.
Yeah, it's kind of a heavy topic, but it's a heavy time.
I think you're right. I think that's exactly right. So there you go. Thank you for joining us as always, and
We'll see
we will
you
be back in a couple days. But tomorrow we have our usual long Sunday talk,
which is going to be fun.
To join us. We're going to be talking about self-witnessing.
Yes, the missing practice.
Yep. All right. So thanks everyone for your time. Stay healthy. Take care of each other. Figure out what your values are.
And try to be nice to each other.
Yeah. We hope that that's something we can all value on some level.
Yeah. I think the value of being nice to each other as human beings is one that we could adopt.
Yep.
All right.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.